welcome to the Smarketing Show, Season 4. Here we are. We're ready to get going. Rick, I'll let you kick it off for us.
Season 4, here we go. This is going to be a good one. We got two awesome guests on today that we'll introduce you to in just a second. We're going to do a masterclass series on AI. Now, before you think, hey, this is another AI thing, because AI is obviously a buzzword. Everybody's jamming AI into everything they're communicating to get attention, whether it's online in conversations. When I go to conferences, Melissa, there's always a breakout on AI. And I think people are confused right now. Business leaders, marketing leaders, salespeople, a lot of our audience, whoever, HR leaders are confused about, this thing kind of, it's a shiny toy and they want to jump in, but they're not sure whether they should jump in. And we thought in this upcoming series, we'd back up a little bit and stay away from maybe the shiny toy and interview a couple of what I would call AI professionals, people that have been in this space for a long time, huge street cred, and I'll get them to introduce themselves in just a second here. But we're going to put together a series. So if you're viewing right now, you're going to see episode 1. Maybe, Melissa, if you want to walk them through the upcoming episodes, and we'll release these each week as building blocks, because we don't think we can cover really and do our audience the due diligence in one episode. So maybe let them know the series coming up.
Yeah, they're exciting. So today we're going to talk, like you said, about beyond the buzzwords. And then episode 2, we're going to speak to workplace risks and rewards. Episode 3 is the AI policy brief. Dun, dun, dun. Sounds very legal. Episode 4, authentic thought leadership. Episode 5 is the Learning Lab. You won't want to miss that one. And then in 2025, if we even hop even further ahead, we're going to talk about the road ahead and what does the future look like in AI. So I'm excited about these.
Yeah, no, I wanted to start by introducing Tommy and Christina because there's a lot of people that I think have thrown a shingle out and said they're an AI expert or they're into AI or whatever. And I have a lot of respect for them because I think this is a huge growth area in business for sure. But I think in this series, I was going to ask Tommy and Christina, maybe you folks to share with our audience, just your background, where you're coming from, and then maybe you could speak to a little bit about what you're doing at VoyAIge Strategy, because I think you've got a really unique cut at what business leaders need to understand, not so much jump in with some toy. So maybe, Tommy, if you could start, just let the folks know where you're coming from. And please, I know you're a humble guy, you are too, Christina, but let them know some of the stripes on your shoulders, because you're not coming at this from a typical angle, I would call it.
Yeah, atypical, I think, is a good way of putting it, Rick. And thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here. Christine and I are really, really excited about this series. So I come at AI from a very atypical place. So I did a PhD years ago. It feels like an eternity ago, at York University, and I focused a lot on AI. And back then in 2012, we're not talking about ChatGPT. We're talking about AI and security, AI and elections, AI sort of working in the background of the internet. And that's sort of where I got my interest from. I was a little bit more focused on privacy at the time, but as time progressed throughout my doctorate, after I did a couple of fellowships, I got into teaching. I taught for about, I've lost track now, Rick, maybe 9 years in sociology and political science. And I feel like every single class I ever taught had something to do with AI. Could be facial recognition in New York City, or it could be policing in California. It could be something about voting in China. There was all sorts of exposure and opportunities to lecture about this stuff with young people. So I went over and lived in Germany for a little while, did a fellowship over there, focusing on AI in Germany and the public system, focusing a little bit more on AI in the smartphone. What does privacy mean when you have AI working in the streets and urban infrastructure in Germany? Came back to Canada, worked in Kingston for a couple of years at Queen's University as a postdoc, focused on AI again, more specifically on the smartphone. And from there, things got really interesting. When we got closer to the pandemic, I had more exposure to AI in the way that we understand it now than I ever had. And it happened very quickly. So, Rick, for a little while, I worked for the Privacy Commissioner, where we studied AI to predict the spread of the pandemic. And this is when we really started seeing AI get really, really crazy. When people started feeling like COVID was really difficult to understand and people started getting really concerned about public health and public security, the first major investments we saw in the world was the kickoff of AI in the context of COVID. So I spent a lot of time working in that. And then I did some similar work working at Queen's University again to help build these same prediction systems for the provincial governments in Canada. And then after that, I worked at Deloitte on the Trustworthy AI team. And after I did some advising in that capacity, I got really excited at this opportunity to start up VoyAIge Strategy. And I'll get more into what we do after I turn over to Christina to talk about her background.
Thanks, Tommy. And hey, congrats on what you've done because, this is why we wanted to get you and Christine on because you are not a traditional, sales and marketing business leader. You guys are advising people now. And I think your approach is, again, as I said, very different. So, Christine,
Yeah,
maybe give us a
thanks,
couple
Rick.
stripes on your shoulder there. I know this is, you got a lot of them.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. So I guess it's good to start at I was a legal editor for many years, and then I became a full-time PhD student and got a PhD in law. So my focus was on surveillance technologies, all kinds, including AI products, and privacy laws, and how we would propose making new laws or changing existing laws so that there could be better protections for Canadians in the sphere of privacy. The other thing that I did after getting a PhD was that I became a law professor, and then I became a senior policy advisor. So I met Tommy. We have a similar set of interests when it comes to privacy, when it comes to surveillance technologies. And we kind of came together and said, this is the new thing that we need to focus on now. The technologies are very complex and they have many concerns, although there are many, many great things about these technologies. We have to make sure that there is a proper balance of what's going on with these technologies and the benefits, also watching the risks and mitigating for those risks.
And
Awesome.
if I may, I think that's a really great segue into what we do at VoyAIge Strategy. Christina hit the nail on the head. We sort of talked last year and we said, your experience is working in the law, being a professor, advising public institutions. I've been doing all of that too, minus the legal part. I'm not a lawyer. Christina's got all the brains in the legal profession for us. But between the three of us, we've got really, really comprehensive knowledge on the law, ethics, and policy when it comes to AI. But we've been working in spaces that allowed us to make contributions and help spread awareness, but not go directly to the client, right? Your client might be the government, might be students, but VoyAIge Strategy is really specialized in the sense that we can work with public and private sector institutions. And that's really, really exciting for us. And Christina really hit the nail on the head in the second sense that what we're trying to do here is help people realize the success of AI by understanding risk. We try to help with AI risk mitigation. We understand how AI can make a company successful, but part of that success is defined by how you govern and you manage that AI itself. And that's what we're really trying to focus on at VoyAIge Strategy.
Yeah, I mean, just in the brief time we've spoken, Melissa, I mean, I know they've taught us a lot just in terms of things we would not even have thought of. I think too many business leaders think AI is ChatGPT or whipping out, some text here or there. And with all due respect, have no idea really the layers behind this thing. And that's what, we want you guys to expose to people so they can be aware and make intelligent decisions around their AI strategy. I think it was either you, Tommy, or Christina mentioned to me about AI policies, and I hit an HR vice president of HR in a conversation last week. I said, and you guys have got an AI policy in place, right? And she was like, yeah, we got one in the works. I'm like, okay, well, anyway, so there's a lot of stuff we're going to cover in the series that is very business pertinent. In today's episode, I think what we wanted to do is just go a little beyond the buzzwords of AI, Melissa, with them. And we'll build on that, as we said, again, around next episode. We'll talk about risks and rewards. We'll get into AI policy conversations in episode 3. But maybe, Melissa, let's get started with our first question you had for them.
Yeah, for sure. So as you said, we're going to start with some of the basics, but Tommy, how would you explain AI to someone who's completely new to the concept and maybe within that speak to the fundamental ideas and processes behind it?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks for asking it. It's such a simple question, and it's often answered in a really complex way with a lot of confusion because AI is a lot. But the simplest way I can put it, Melissa, is to get people to think about a machine that's trying to mimic human thinking.
Mm.
When people work, when they live in their daily life, you are learning, you are problem solving, you're trying to figure out how you get from one task to the next. So if you can imagine a machine that is built the same way, that's what we mean when we talk about artificial intelligence. Now, obviously, the concepts and the models are a lot more complicated than that. So if I were to step one step further in towards a little bit more complexity, I would say that AI really at its fundamental core, Melissa, and it doesn't really matter what kind of AI we're talking about. You have a specific kind of mathematical equation that is written by people that are very intelligent, and they give that equation to a set of data. And what they do is they have those data feed through the equation many, 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 many times. In a lot of instances, the equation actually changes based upon the data and how often it's processing those data. And this is when we get into things like machine learning. AI is intelligent, as we say, and it's because it's constantly improving itself. So just like being in a math classroom, when your teacher gives you an equation that you write down in your notebook and you process that equation yourself to come up with an answer like a number, imagine AI doing that very efficiently, very quickly, many, 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 many times every second, and it's getting better every time it does it. That's what we mean when we talk about AI.
Hmm.
Awesome. Great explanation. Thank you.
So the first time I heard AI, I was skating around a hockey rink, and a buddy of mine who's an IT guru said to me, "Hey, have you heard of this thing called ChatGPT? This is a couple of Novembers ago." And I was like, of course, I said, yes. What is it? And so that was my first brush. And since then, we understand there's a lot of horses in this AI race and a new one entering every day. But Christina, are you okay walking us back a little bit? You've been studying this in coaching, business leaders and this for a while. Like, walk us back a bit in terms of the history of AI, if you would, like where this thing originated from, because I think a lot of people just see it today and they don't understand kind of how long the tail is on this thing.
Sure, absolutely. So the idea of AI started way back with Alan Turing. That's a big name because he's the one who cracked the Enigma in 1940 during the war, and he's also the one that made the famous Turing test in 1950, testing a machine's ability to exhibit intelligent behavior and determine if it was like a human. And that was the beginning. The first AI programs examined language and problem solving, but it wasn't until the 1980s that AI was developed to focus on specific areas of human expertise. And then there was an AI winter. So nothing notable happened until 1997, when IBM's Deep Blue defeated the world chess champion. And then a little bit later in 2015, AlphaGo, an AI that mastered the ancient Chinese game of Go and won. And this was a complex board game of strategy and creativity and ingenuity. From that point on, AI has been making waves, including what we know, ChatGPT, the chatbot that came on the scene about 2022. And the latest version, it's already gone up to the version of ChatGPT-O.
I know it's been around for a while, and I do remember the chess champion being defeated, and we had no idea that was the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
So a lot of people I think ChatGPT, as an agency, marketing agency, and we were into sales automation, all that stuff. We're seeing a lot of different players, but if I was to ask you, maybe Tommy, what would be the different types of AI that you're seeing out there? Because we may look at them as like micro solutions, but you're probably looking maybe a little more holistically in terms of what the field looks like.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm happy to expand on that a little bit. I think, when Christina's talking about the history of AI, it's really interesting because we start getting this idea that it's very monolithic and it's one thing, and it's really not. There's so many different kinds of AI, Rick. I think the first one that people are probably going to identify with the most when you talk about it, when you're watching Terminator, Skynet sort of stuff, you're gonna hear about machine learning. And so I sort of already explained this process earlier, but I'm happy to share a little bit more insight on it. When you have algorithms that are designed to make predictions, When you have algorithms that are designed to make decisions on your behalf, let's say you want to watch sci-fi on Netflix, and you enter in sci-fi, and it starts recommending titles. These are kinds of decision-making capabilities that are built upon algorithms that are designed to learn based upon what it is that you're giving it. You enter words into a search query, there's a machine learning system in the background, and it's trying to understand what you like, and it's feeding you titles that might be relevant to what you're interested in. And this is what we generally mean by machine learning. What's funny about this, though, is that in the context of the last year, let's say we were to have this conversation a year ago, it would be really, really difficult to talk about machine learning because it's everywhere now. It used to be the case that machine learning was really, really specific and only existed in certain platforms, but now it's like the bedrock of almost every kind of artificial intelligence system. So that's machine learning. If we were to get a little bit more complicated, we would talk about neural networks. Now, if you work in healthcare, you've probably heard this quite a bit. A neural network is a much more complicated version of machine learning, and the way that it works, Rick and Melissa, and to our listener that is excited to learn about this sort of thing. Imagine a machine that's trying to mimic the human brain as much as possible. If you spend a minute thinking about that and the way your brain works, unless you're a healthcare professional, this is actually quite complicated. So I can simplify it a little bit. Imagine that in your day-to-day life, you attribute value and meaning to the things that are important to you because you think about them a lot. If you're a hockey player, if you're a Maple Leafs fan, you probably think about Mitch Marner quite a bit right now. And the more you do that, the more neuroplastic strength that you build, your relationship to Mitch grows in your mind because you're thinking about it so much. This is kind of what happens in neural networks. Network tries to understand, or the artificial intelligence system tries to understand what it is that's relevant when it's dealing with certain kinds of data, and it attributes more weight or more meaning to certain kinds of words that are being used in a certain context. And so when I talk about Netflix, it is definitely machine learning, but it's also a neural network in the sense that if I look up sci-fi a lot because I happen to love sci-fi, it's going to add more weight to words like Lord of the Rings or Star Trek or Star Wars. And this is how the network grows. It builds associations by adding more weight to certain keywords and certain data points over time. To make things a little bit more complicated, and this is the last example that I'm going to give because there are so many different kinds of applications for this stuff, is natural language processing. Rick, just a moment ago, you were talking about ChatGPT. This is ChatGPT. The way natural language processing works is that it's essentially focusing on interpreting human language. So if you give it a document that I wrote or like a paper that Christina wrote when she was doing her PhD in law, and you ask that system to learn off of it, it's not only going to try to understand what Christina is talking about and give weight to certain words that are coming up more and seem to be more important than others, it's going to try to sound like Christina. It's going to try to interpret the way she thinks, the way she reasons, and the way she comes up with conclusions and solutions. This is what we mean by natural language processing. And Rick and Melissa, this is why when your kids come home from work and they're talking about the people they sit next to using AI to write papers for them, this is what's going on. You're asking a machine like ChatGPT to produce a paper, but it's going to try to sound like the person that it's talking to. So when I talk to people about AI today, these are the kinds of conversations that come up. Machine learning, neural networks, and natural language processing, because in some way or form, we're seeing all of them exist in the platforms that people are using on a daily basis right now.
Right.
Yeah. Like, you know, so we're using them. Sorry, I know you get a question. We're using that our agency right now, Tommy and Christina. So we're running AI platforms. Well, think of it as basic as the Google, you know, search algorithms, right? Once I start looking for this, I see it more. Because I think people think it's this new thing when really it's been around for a while. I would argue that, you know, when I grew up, my parents used to use a paper-based map driving around. You know what I mean? And now we have a right? GPS, we just plug it in and wait. You know, I would argue that that's kind of an early version. So it's been around for a while. I just think it's hyper growth is what's confusing people. And as we move forward in this series, you guys are going to make people aware, I think, of some of the risks associated with it that you've educated me on. But we are using the tools. There's some positive things, but as we go forward, there are some negative things that be aware of. For example, a lot of our customers from a marketing standpoint say, hey, can I not just chat GPT this content and then pop it up on a web page? Well, no, Google now has the ability to comb through and penalize. And I know professors and teachers are now using these, anti-chat GPT, AI, whatever to detect. So the allure is there, I think, to do a lot of things, but the fear factor, I think, but people just don't know. That's why we wanted to have you guys on. Sorry, Melissa, what were you gonna say?
I'm just going to say, Christina and Tommy, every technology has its limitations, right? So what are some current challenges or potential risks that we should be aware of with respect to AI?
Well, I can help you with that one. There's many risks, many risks. Here are just a few. First one I have to mention is that AI is very prone to hallucinate, and you never know when it's going to happen. They just make stuff up, and it's totally not true, and it's convincing, so you don't know it's making stuff up.
Right.
One example would be that an AI chatbot, it was ChatGPT, wrote a legal brief with fictitious legal citations that a lawyer brought to court. The court was not impressed once they discovered that none of these cases that were being cited were even real. The lawyer got in some trouble with the Provincial Law Society that was applied to that lawyer. So I think that that is the first thing we have to remember. You can't just believe everything it says. That's kind of important because accuracy is critical for things like professional work, right? You can't just make stuff up.
Christina,
Another
come in
one.
there. Sorry, we've built a AI ChatGPT powered chatbot, and we put them on our clients' websites to service level 1 inquiries, right? Hours of business, etc. And to
Right.
your point, we've had to put on the website a disclaimer that says we cannot be responsible for anything this bot says. I don't want to scare people from using, AI bots, but because we heard horror stories of people going to sites and they quoted the car price at this and the dealer had to offer it and all those. So you know to your point, what you see is not necessarily always accurate, and I think then there's too many naive people out there about that. And Tommy, back to what you were talking about, I think and you may get into it, Christina, but people have no idea, in my opinion, what they should and should not be uploading into this thing. They are feeding the lion. And, most companies I mentioned earlier have no policies. They got no guardrails. There's no, anyway, sorry to interject, but I just think that your point about not believing what you're seeing, we're living that right now with the AI bots we're creating for clients.
Right. That is definitely one risk. Now, here is another risk. This is scary, okay? AI can be biased. More specifically, there can be algorithmic bias. That's what it's called, where algorithms routinely make decisions like about big things like healthcare, housing, employment, insurance, big things. And there's biases deeply embedded in the AI systems. For example, gender biases or racial biases or some other kind of bias, to the point where it can be critical decisions are being made based on these models and it's impacting daily life. But it's risky because there's biases right in there and you don't know. You don't know. You can't say, aha, there's the bias right there. I'll just get rid of that. It's not that easy. Baked right in. And because decisions are made based on what is spit out of these models, discriminatory decisions can be made. And that's a little bit dangerous. Because if it's based on the prohibited grounds of discrimination, now you're dealing with human rights obligations or ramifications. So that is the problem there. There's many places along in the process where this can happen, where the bias is kind of added in the mix. It can happen when you're just collecting the data or collecting the data that reflects existing prejudice, preparing the data. This is a really important one, selecting which attributes the algorithm is going to be considering. When you're the one saying, okay, algorithm, do these kinds of things, that alone could be changing the question and changing the answer. And it could be discriminatory. It could be based on gender biases or racial biases or religious biases or any other kind of bias.
What would be an example, Christina? Sorry, I'm running a business and I engage in some AI. I'm looking for a practical, relatable example here that someone may use AI and it gives them a spin that's not really accurate or could put them in a problem. Like, can you give me an example of
Sure.
how a business could get into a problem area there?
Sure. So let's just take insurance because that is a very obvious case to make the point. Let's say it's an insurance company and they are deciding whether they are going to cover a person for some kind of insurance, like employment disability insurance or life insurance or some other kind of insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And they are, just saying, inputting a few details about the personal background of this person or name, address, all this kind of stuff. And lo and behold, it's making decisions that are going to be affecting this person. And they may be denying insurance coverage to this person when really it's not even applicable. It's just because of whatever, maybe they're based on a certain area of the city that the person lives, and that is going to be affecting whether the person gets coverage at all.
Okay.
So that's a big life decision that's being made on behalf of this person. And now they could be missing out and not being able to fully participate in society based on whatever discrimination is happening.
Okay, good.
So that would be an example, denying insurance.
Okay.
Were
Okay.
there any other risks that you were going to mention, or?
Absolutely. There's plenty of risks. So, there could be a lack of human oversight or a human in the loop is another way of calling it. What it is when there is machine learning training that does not incorporate human feedback, where there's no human oversight or human in the loop. And this would mean that there's no adaptations following human feedback, no opportunity for an iterative approach where the human is saying, no, just try this. And then the AI makes adjustments and adapts to what the feedback is. And then they kind of have a back and forth until it is what the human would want. When there is no safeguards, that is a problem. That is a problem. Another example would be a significant digital divide could be created. First, because certain people in society may not be able to access these AI models or any kind of way of working with the AI. So they're kind of shut out right from the get-go. And then there's the other situation where what you have is, in addition to access, there could be a new generation of smart machines fueled by rapid advances in AI, robotics, and this could replace a large proportion of existing human jobs. And that could be another way that there is a major digital divide because a lot of the people, the majority of the people, would be shut out completely. And so that's kind of alarming for some people to come to terms with.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
we're going to talk, I think, about what industries are going to be affected and maybe some roles coming up in today's conversation. But that human in the loop thing, Melissa and I, we hosted that meeting with that hospital in New York City a few weeks ago.
Yes.
And, I put into one of the platforms, give me a picture of a bunch of healthcare people that run hospitals in a boardroom in New York City. And I'm just using the graphical mistakes that happen. Like people with no hands, or it's like, so with no human in the loop, as you call it, that's an interesting term. There's common sense stuff that you can tell is wrong in graphics, but I translate that to a lot of our customers do workflow automation. So where there's a human task, a series of human touches, they now have deployed automation, but without some human in the loop. Like we're seeing there's some AI that's pretty bright, and there's some AI that's not so bright, depending. But anyway, thanks for mentioning that. Melissa, I think you were going to ask about a real world example or something of AI. Is that right?
Yeah, I was. I know we were chatting before, maybe one with an airline or something like that. Christina, could you expand on that a little bit?
Right. So what happened here was there was a chatbot, part of the website, the company website, where the customer service was being provided by this chatbot. So people who went onto the airline website to buy the tickets, they asked questions to the actual chatbot. And can I do this? And so the chatbot gave an answer. The person was misled by this answer because it was not completely correct. In fact, it was wrong enough that it was questionable. And what ended up happening was the airline had to pay to cover the difference between the airline's bereavement rates and the full price, because they said, yeah, you can get it at this rate, but it was not correct. So who had to pay? The airline had to pay for not properly training the chatbot.
Yeah, you mentioned training, and I think in one of our episodes coming up, we're going to talk about staff training or employee training. And I mean, through our lens, just so you know, we work with hundreds of companies. I can probably, I wouldn't even need one hand to count the AI training going on, just as a
100%.
scary point. And now, Tommy, okay, so business leaders, this thing comes out, ChatGPT, AI's at every conference you go to. I mean, I can tell you the webinars that we host with an AI in the name draw attendance. I see a mix between the leaders that we work with. Some are like trying to go all in, but I find sometimes they're all in and they realize, ouch, like that, there's a better one tomorrow, or I had no idea how my people,
Sure.
So could you talk a little bit to what you think business leaders should be doing in terms of getting into AI? Like, because a lot of them are on the fence right now, and they're waiting for the next generation, or they've been burned once, or they had some success or whatever. Like, through your eyes, like, what do you see?
Yeah, really great question. I had a lot of experience with this in the last couple of years, which is interesting, because if we were to have this conversation a year ago, and I alluded to this earlier, how many people would you have known, like as a business, using something like ChatGPT? Probably what, a handful?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Everybody's using it now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Almost everybody I know in some sort of professional capacity that isn't retired has a subscription to Claude or ChatGPT. And this is really, really interesting. And so as easy as it is to go and sign up and pay 20 bucks a month to get access to a natural language processor that can understand you and your business and even sound like you, it's always important to be strategic and not hasty. So Rick, what I'm thinking is I can give like 4 or 5 points here that I think are helpful steps that businesses can follow for bringing in AI. What do you think? Does that sound all right?
Yeah, I think, yeah, exactly. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah, okay.
And speak openly, like our audience wants to know what you think. You're not one of us, I'll call it.
Yeah.
So you've covered a lot more ground on this than we have. So
Yeah.
you're whatever you think.
Fair enough, fair enough. So there is something like a process. I think when companies are being deliberate and intentional and they want to make sure that their investment pays off and doesn't cause problems that are especially unforeseeable, you need to be strategic and need to not be hasty. That's the big takeaway. So I'll give you some tips for whoever's listening on how to do this. The first is to understand your business needs. Have a look at your workforce, talk to your employees, and really understand what's not working for you. And I think any executive listening right now understands what the problem points are. Some staff in certain units spend too much time on this. This is something I heard quite a bit when I was working in a consulting capacity on finding the right AI fit for companies last year. And the biggest one that I heard was reducing manual tasking. How can I get my administrators and my salespeople and my designers and my programmers to stop spending 33% of their time every day entering data points that we know already exist somewhere else in the business in a different database into an Excel in front of them. Because if you can return that 33% of their time, you're saving money and you're potentially making that individual in the company or that team of individuals more efficient. Could you imagine how much easier your job would be if you didn't have to send the same email to the same people every day?
Tommy,
This is a huge.
I was gonna have a bot show up on this podcast, but I thought it'd be a chance for you guys, just so you know.
Build a profile of me.
Deep fake, sorry, a deep fake of me talking here, just so
Yeah.
you know. We'll
We
get
will
to
talk
that.
about deepfakes at some point. Yeah,
We'll get
absolutely.
to that, yeah.
Yeah, so I think again the point that I'm trying to make here, the one I'm really stressing is really understand what your business needs are. If you want to find the right fit for AI, understand what are the most painful things that you're dealing with on a daily basis. And for many companies, like I said, this is lost time doing really, really repetitive work.
Mm.
Once you figured that out, the next step is to see if you can collect data on how much time you're losing. If you understand that's a problem, and you understand that it's a problem anecdotally because you're talking to your staff, you're talking to your workforce on a daily basis, can you find a way to go and collect data points on how much time is being lost? So I'll give you a quick example. I worked with a global consultancy last year that was a client of mine. And what they said was, we think our people are spending too much time hitting Alt Tab. So you'd have one software open when they're doing their work and building their deliverables for their clients, but then they have to hit Alt Tab, go into another platform, and enter in updates so that the client can see progress on the work. And by hitting Alt Tab, I encourage them to start measuring how many times in a day are your people hitting Alt Tab? They had no idea. And after they spent some time building data points on how many times they would hit Alt Tab, it was absolutely crazy to start seeing in the data that people were losing like 15 minutes, 30, 45 minutes every day just hitting Alt Tab. It's a lot of Alt Tab. You're probably going to spend a lot of money replacing your keyboards at that point. But really, after you're able to assess a business need, if you have data that you can give to an AI company that are then going to build you some sort of bespoke, something tailored that's going to help reduce manual tasking for your business, that data is what's going to be used to train that AI to work really, really efficiently for your company. So that's step 2. Make sure you have data on your pain points. And then from there, it makes a lot of sense to start developing use cases. You might have a sense that lost time entering the same text into emails is really problematic, or that you're alt-tabbing too much. But if you have a sense that there are 3 or 4 areas across your business where there are real problems, see if you can generate a situation, something that you can explain in a PowerPoint deck, and send it around to your business leaders so you can get them on the same page. So when I talk about use cases, it's not just validating for the AI company, for the vendor to help design something bespoke for you, but you're trying to socialize it across the business and generate alignment. Once everybody's on the same page, it's a lot easier to move forward in investing in AI and confidence. From there, you can start launching pilot projects. One of the biggest mistakes I've seen companies make in the past is once they get some sort of AI system, they launch it immediately. It's sometimes better to not be hasty, as I mentioned earlier, and to be strategic. And what that might look like is this. If you figure out that ChatGPT is a good fit for your business because you want to save some time for your creative people, get a small team together. Don't bring them all together at the same time, but maybe bring 2 or 3 people and have them work with that AI model, that AI system for a couple of months. And make sure you understand how it worked well and what the pain points are along the way. They're going to have to be trained to be more efficient on it, developing some custom prompts or whatever. But understanding how the AI can work in a way that's efficient, but in a controlled way, is going to help continue validating and continue aligning the business in terms of what is a good investment. While you're doing all of this, keep an eye on what your competitors are doing. Monitor industry pace is the next step. When you have pilot projects running in your teams or trying to get experience working with AI systems, spend some time. Maybe you can locate a few people that have some great research experience or really interested in this kind of work, and start looking at how the competitors in your respective industry are using the AI system. Not just to see what's working well for them, but try to understand, are they moving too quickly? What are their pain points? And any knowledge that you can bring together as you're testing these systems out is going to make it a lot easier and a lot more compelling and a lot more successful for you to implement that AI system. And the last point that I have is this. Once you've figured this all out, once you've figured out your strategy and your plan, and you've brought the system into your business, manage it proactively. And this is something that we excel at VoyAIge Strategy. When you talk about managing AI, you are also talking about policies and procedures. What are the accountability systems for making sure that the system is working properly? How do you explain to your stakeholders what success and what failure looks like when your entire workforce is using AI? How do you make sure that the people who are using those AI systems are using them properly? What rules do they have to follow? So policies and procedures are a really important way of managing AI proactively. And aside from that, and Rick had mentioned this earlier, and I heard Melissa talk about it too, training is really, really important. ChatGPT is pretty straightforward. We like to think that because our kids can generate their essays for their teachers really quickly when they get home from school, use cases and applying ChatGPT or any other natural language processing system in the real world, in the professional world, takes a lot more careful thought. Systems can be very, very efficient and very helpful, but making sure that your staff know how to use it in an efficient and meaningful way is going to help ensure that using that AI is actually successful for the business. And the last point that I have in terms of managing AI proactively is to generate some thought leadership. Show off a bit. Tell your staff what you know about
How would you
AI.
do that, Tommy? Yeah, how would you do that?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways that can be done, Rick. I think some companies do this really successfully already and they don't even know it. Newsletters. Sometimes on their websites, you're going to see updates about what's going on in the world. Can you have something like a bulletin or a weekly update that says, hey, this thing happened in California with AI law. Here's why we think it's interesting and why it affects us. When you are able to talk to your staff and your workforce and your stakeholders about what's going on in the world of news and AI updates, it generates trust and it generates transparency. That's why we think thought leadership is so important. It's like the glue that keeps everyone bound together.
Which is episode 4 for us here.
Conveniently, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you know, Tommy makes a good point, Melissa. So I think a lot of our customers, so we on the intercommunication side, we're managing the communications, the digital side, of course, whether it's website, blogs, emails, social media. And inside the organizations, I mean, we plug in as a sales and marketing entity, but they've got operations, they've got, you know, fulfillment, they got, you know, all kinds of pockets. And I don't think our customers communicate, to Tommy's point, enough about what they're doing with AI to improve the experience of their end user. I think that's a really good point you make there. And then validating it with some thought leadership or benchmarking against what's going on, and being genuine around, you know, that you have done these things. Like you said, you identified the problem, you looked at the data, you did a pilot project, you launched it in the proper way. Because differentiation, we work a lot in the tech sector, we're up against commoditization all the time, right? And so what you talk about there, I think, is an opportunity for our customers, is to share what they're doing with AI to improve the experience, you know, whatever it is for their customers. I just don't see them doing that at all.
I agree.
People are curious and they're confused.
Yeah.
How could you not be? I mean,
Yeah.
we just talked a moment ago about how quickly ChatGPT has spread. It really invites a lot of thinking, doesn't it? Oh, so the person that's competing with me is using it, and some of my staff are using it too. Maybe I should try it out, but how do I use it? And once you start experimenting with the thing, it's really, really exciting. And the more you do it over time, the more the ethicists and the lawyers in your organization are going to be asking you questions.
Yeah.
Did you enter any customer data into ChatGPT? Did you know that there's a law about that? This is where things can get a bit scary. And so if you want to continue generating trust and keep that alignment going across the business, talk about AI. And this is what we mean by thought leadership. So I really agree with you guys. I think it's a really important step that businesses can take to generate trust.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
one of our customers, Melissa, in New York, has suggested that they have a group, an AI group within the organization that is, spearheading projects and all these kinds of things. And because to your point, it permeates real fast. And I think a lot of companies, the launch is pretty much an email that goes to everybody. And it says, hey, you got a membership if you want to use it. There's no training, there's no guardrails, and I may be off a little bit, but I think I'm pretty accurate in terms of generally what's going on. And, as a salesperson, I don't mind breaking the odd rule here or there, but I have no idea how deep I am over the edge, maybe by, from security or client information or whatever, maybe sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So what industries are you guys seeing like, adopting AI quicker than others, or, are the most benefits like for this type of industry, are the ones that you guys have seen?
Yeah, it's a great question, Rick. I'd mentioned earlier in the episode that healthcare was very quick to this.
Mm.
Really the first time we saw AI spread in a really significant way, in a way that would touch everybody on a daily basis, even if people didn't know about it. It wasn't in Netflix search engine.
Mm.
It was with COVID. Epidemiologists were really overwhelmed. Like trying to study the spread of anthrax a couple hundred years ago is very different than trying to study the spread and stop the spread of
Mm.
COVID in such a globalized world. And so if you work in healthcare, people are talking about AI all the time. I personally, for example, I really do believe that AI will be the source of the cure for cancer. I
Mm.
think they're going to beat researchers to the punch. And so healthcare is always going to be at the leading edge of innovation, I think. We also see AI being used quite a bit in finance. I'm sure you guys know accountants who've talked about their fears that they might lose their jobs because AI is so good at crunching numbers. AI is really, really strong and everywhere in retail. I
Mm.
think of maybe the 15 or 20 companies that I talked to and worked with last year alone in 2023 that were retailers, they had been really interested or were already using some sort of forecasting model, trying to understand market behavior before you get there. Should or should you not put certain sandals on sale for the second week of November before everyone goes down south for vacation? And so retail was a real leader. But Rick, you'd also talked a little bit about tech and IT. I think everybody who's listening right now has either dabbled with AI or the company's already bringing it in. This is really interesting, especially in cybersecurity. It's really fun and kind of serendipitous that we're doing this podcast for
Mm.
Cybersecurity Month. There isn't a single company that I've come across, whether it's in the news or talked to directly, that isn't already using AI if they're a cybersecurity or IT company. And what we're seeing quite a bit is using AI to detect unusual behavior. If somebody's trying to gain unauthorized access into a system, it could take a small team of IT professionals X number of hours to try to understand what malicious behavior looks like. But an AI system could probably figure it out in an instant. And so we're seeing this quite a bit. What we're also seeing, which is really interesting, is that same platform. So if you're an IT company, if you're a cybersecurity provider, what your competitors are probably doing is using some sort of platform that is not only trying to identify malicious or suspicious behavior in a system, it's also generating policies for how employees should respond to certain threats or should be using existing tools in the business. When you have a natural language processor embedded in a cybersecurity system that is writing policies for you, there are going to be a lot of blind spots. I'll give you a small example. Lack of alignment with business goals, or lack of alignment with existing policies on how you expect your executives and your workforce to use the same tools that they were trained on since they were hired. And so AI in cybersecurity is growing exponentially. So I think across healthcare, finance, retail, tech and IT in general, but cybersecurity in particular, we're seeing it quite a bit. The last one I'll mention is education. We've talked about this a few times today, right? How many times have your kids come home and talked about tricking the teacher with ChatGPT? It's probably not something you want to hear from your kids, but it's forcing the industry to aggressively pivot and shift because look, if you're a professor right now, and I'm sure Christina could speak to this as well, I certainly didn't have to deal with it, and I'm really grateful that I didn't have to. If you're a prof and you have students submitting papers that are written by ChatGPT, you have to fundamentally rethink what you're doing
Mm.
because they're going to continue doing it. And ChatGPT is going to fundamentally change the way people think and write. And so you need a response strategy. So aside from those initial industries, education is a very big one as well, Rick.
Yeah, we see the bad guys in the cyber area using AI as well.
Oh, do you?
This is what, yeah, our clients are doing a lot of webinars actually on, AI, kind of how the bad guys are using it against, to get in, and then how it's being used proactively, like you said, to identify trends and identify
Mhm.
potential attacks, based on, national, international data. So, yeah.
Mhm.
Sorry, Melissa, you had the next question for these guys.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were speaking there, you said some people are fearful of losing their jobs over this. So Christina, maybe you can talk to what human jobs will be impacted the most with this.
Sure. So with AI, many workers currently believe that they're shielded from the results of AI,
Mm.
and they may even believe that there's only one kind of worker that will be affected by something like job losses or layoffs
Mhm.
because of the technology.
Mm.
However, that is not the case with AI. In fact, studies have shown that researchers know from experience of doing several studies that about 40% of all working hours could be impacted by AI, large language models, LLMs is what we call them, such as ChatGPT.
Mm.
So what that means is we know that there's certain kinds of areas that are more at risk, but no one is really safe. We can't assume that anymore.
Right.
We know that things like clerical and secretarial roles, data entry clerks, bank tellers, postal service clerks, these kinds of jobs are more at risk and are likely going to decline because of AI. And some newer roles, though, will be popping up because they're more in demand and they're going to grow, such as AI and machine learning specialists, data analysts, and scientists, and digital transformation specialists.
Mm.
These ones will grow. So some may decline a bit, some may grow more, but there is a lot of possibility that there will be an effect across many jobs. And we can't assume that we're safe. And new skills will always be needed. So the good news is it's good to have some good news.
Yep.
People are going to be needing to reskill. But if
Mm.
they do, there's going to be other roles for them. It's
Mhm.
not like, well, some are more optimistic than others. I have to say that some believe that, millions of jobs are going to be wiped out. Others believe that we would share the work, like humans and machines would share the work about equally by 2027. So that maybe in right now and in the past it wasn't so much. It was like humans did 80% and maybe machines did 20% and we didn't really see what was going on there. That will have to be more shared over time, and humans will have to learn to work with the machines,
Right.
which is new for our situation here in AI. But that is the situation.
Okay. Awesome.
So, Tommy, what do you see as like new positions? Like you mentioned a couple, Christina, like as
Digital
this thing
transformation.
comes more full, we're still in the infancy phase of this thing. Is that a
Mhm.
fair comment? Like we are still, if this was a child, like
Mm.
what would you put the age if you were to, you know, an analogy, say AI is a child, where are we at, would you guys say, in its infancy? Are we
I would
talking
call AI an infant.
like a
Mm.
3 month old, a 6 months old, like in that, like we are
6 to 9 months.
okay,
I
okay, that's
No
agree.
more than that. Not 12
okay.
months. Not double digits yet.
I think people think they got it like a teenager walking around out there, Tommy. Honestly,
I
they think
agree.
this thing's mature and can walk it. This is a wild horse we're seeing through our, a lot of good things, but a lot of, kicks to the face too. If you don't, aren't on the right end of the horse, right?
It moves fast, but the thing to remember is that because technology innovates so quickly,
Yeah,
because people are designing technology faster and faster and faster,
yeah,
these things tend to have a life cycle to them that is much longer than like that initial impact of getting
yeah.
something shiny and new, like a brand new smartwatch. This is very much an infancy stage. It's going to get more and more complicated, and the competencies are going to
Yeah.
improve and
I
increase as
love
well.
it.
Yeah.
I
Me
love it.
too.
I love tech. I
Exciting.
love the potential of this thing. So, Tommy, what would you say are some positions that are opening up you're seeing through your lens?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we are seeing quite a bit. And there's a caveat to this. As a bottom line, and just remind me if I miss it. I'm going to come back to it after I give some examples. So, one that we're seeing quite a bit are ethicists.
Mm.
When when I started hearing last year that everybody was getting into AI more, and these are professor friends of mine, they were worried that they were going to lose their jobs. They were really scared that, because AI was doing a lot of the thinking for a lot of people, that they might become obsolete.
Mm.
Can I find a job if I'm not in the academy anymore? What would I do? You'd become an ethicist.
What does an
This
ethicist do?
it's
I know that's a
That's a
caveman
new role,
question,
Rick.
but
It's our new
it's a
role.
new one.
I
Yep.
don't work with a lot of ethicists, just so you know. But what does one do? They talk to me in, again, 9-month-old language here. What do they
Yeah,
do?
they tell you what bad words not to use.
Okay, all right.
Like the
They
priest. It's the priest
exactly,
of
yeah. They're the guardian angels in the company.
Okay,
Their goal
okay,
is to build policies. When
okay,
we talk about ethics, we're talking about like a codified system of right and wrong, right?
okay,
Whatever your moral basis is as a person or as a company. Your
okay.
ethicist is the person that takes your understanding of good and bad, which I think is pretty obvious for most companies these days,
Yep.
but they build policies out of it. They assess the impact of the AI systems that you're using, and they help ensure compliance. So we're seeing ethicists, like specifically AI ethicists, show
Mhm.
up in big companies.
Mhm.
Another one that we're seeing are strategists.
Mm.
It's not the same thing to have your business strategy leaders think about success with AI unless you have some sort of specific training and understanding and some fluency in AI. So, alongside of business strategists and business opportunity development leaders, we're also seeing people come in that sort of do the same thing, but the primary vehicle that's driving their thinking is AI. These are really, really critically important people for ensuring that, for example, if you do bring an AI system into a business unit and you want to make sure that that unit is using it properly and is finding new ways to innovate with that AI system. So not just bringing it in to get rid of manual tasking, but also to make that AI system work even harder, to find new opportunities to reduce other kinds of manual tasks that you missed, for example. These people are really, really important. We're seeing governance specialists too. And so, like an ethicist, these are like your privacy officers that work
Mhm.
specifically on AI. They're the people that are creating and enforcing rules on how to and how not to use AI. They are people who recognize that the company may have stakeholders, clients, and customers all around the world. And so their job is to understand what are the legal requirements? What are the compliance requirements of the jurisdictions where our stakeholders exist? Because if you're taking their data and you're entering them into a system like ChatGPT, there are laws that probably exist in Europe or in California or in New York that you weren't even aware of. And so those people are really, really good at making sure that you're not missing any legal requirements that could get you into trouble just by virtue of the fact of simply using ChatGPT on a daily basis. And what we're also seeing, which is kind of interesting, guys, is that these people are existing in new business units. We're seeing centers of excellence pop up in big
Mhm.
organizations. These are places where you can bring together your champions of AI, your tech champions in the company, your data and your analytics champions, who collaborate on figuring out the best practices for your AI to drive innovation, to specialize in governance, to figure out what successful use looks like and what it means, to make sure that you're driving innovation, that you're responsible on a daily basis for staying ahead of the learning curve with these things. Now, I said earlier there was a caveat to all this, and I remember to bring it up. And I think this is the most important part. Even though there's a lot of new jobs being created, and we're seeing new business units like centers of excellence prop up all over the place, having a cross organizational competency is the bottom line that matters. How many times have we talked about training and education in this
Mhm.
this episode alone?
Mhm.
getting everybody who touches AI up to a basic minimum competency and understanding and comfort with an AI system is what's going to make your business successful overall. Because if you have people that are in the dark, they're a bit nervous or they're afraid of the thing, it's going to slow down adoption and buy-in. And that's why I think, despite all of these new jobs that are being created right now, having some sense of basic minimum competency across the business is a really great strategy for ensuring success.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'm hearing through all of what you both have said today is don't be too hasty. Don't move too quickly. We're 9 months old, right? Or like acting like infants here.
Have a strategy.
Yeah, have a strategy.
Well, the so-called experts out there are saying like AI is going to impact, humans in the same way the creation of fire or the invention of fire did. And as we're trying our best to stay on top of what's happening, at least in the lanes that we operate. And a lot of companies they're not big enough. A lot of our customers may be 50 employees, 100 employees, maybe, up to 500 employees, and they don't have a chief AI officer role or they'll hand it to a techie person typically to go, hey, figure this out, which we'd be doing. And I kind of see what you're doing at VoyAIge Strategy in layman terms is I think you would do a scan of the business conceptually to look at what they're doing. And then based on your backgrounds, Christina, you from legal, ethics, all those good things, and Tommy, what you've seen in terms of the good, bad, and ugly from a consulting standpoint, could maybe say to them, hey, you're leaking over here. This is a no-brainer up front here at reception. And then, give them the keys probably to do it themselves or whatever. And I don't think there's enough sounding boards out there that see it from a holistic perspective. I think they're techie people going, let's replace these 3 manual steps with this AI thing and hope it lasts for more than 3 months kind of thing. That's my cut at it. But I just want to say, if you're listening, we are very pro AI. I think, Tommy and Christina, you guys are too. It's just like anything that comes out, operate at your own risk kind of thing. Huge rewards, obviously. We're seeing tremendous replacement of human effort on our side, creativity's up, and the AIs tend to work with different AIs now, so there's a lot of collaboration through tools that we're using. So we're really high on it, and that's why I wanted you guys to talk to business leaders really about the business side of it. So,
and you just tipped to our next episode, Rick, which is risks and rewards, because there
risks
is
and rewards. Okay,
lots
that's good.
of rewards.
Yeah. So I just want to say thanks for your tour today, Christina and Tommy. I found it really interesting. And one of the things I post a lot about on LinkedIn is how I believe that with all this AI stuff going on, I think the value of the human within whatever we do is going to increasingly become more relevant. So if you're a business person or a marketer or a salesperson, I think the more you can elevate your human skills to complement this AI thing as opposed to hide behind the AI thing, I think you'll be better off because to me, that man in the loop or human in the loop or woman in the loop, whatever it was you mentioned, I think that the combination to me is what. But maybe I'm talking as a bald guy here a little age, but anyway, I just want to say thanks very much for you two coming on today. I'm looking forward to the risks and rewards next episode. So thanks very much for joining us and sharing what you did today.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us. We really appreciate it.
I'm really excited for this series. I think it's an awesome time to be having these conversations, and I'm really grateful to be a part of it here. So thank you.
Yeah, all good.
Thanks. Have a great day, guys.